The XRP ledger and XRP itself will fully facilitate the upcoming 19 trillion USD tokenization onto the XRP ledger. Naturally, all of this has been validated by a number of sources, and Ripple is keeping a watch on the enormous increase in tokenization by organizations on the XRP ledger. Furthermore, we must not overlook the fact that this will result in one of the largest supply shocks and monetary introductions into the XRP ledger in history. This is where institutional-grade custody comes in at 19 trillion to begin with, but by the end of 2033, that amount may rise to $650 trillion. This is the topic of discussion, which explains why it has been predicted that the price of XRP would surpass $2,953 by the first quarter of 2026 and surpass $35,000 by 2030. The possibility that XRP could even be backed by gold has been raised by a number of central banks, particularly Singapore, which launched Singapore Gold-backed and has chosen to incorporate XRP into a gold-backed system in order to make it easier to transact in gold using XRP and the XRP ledger. However, that is a completely different topic and a completely different sector with a market value in the hundreds of billions of dollars. We're currently concentrating on the real estate, real-world asset, and tokenization markets, which can reach $650 trillion or higher. Once more, though, we need to examine the events of the past few days. The introduction of trillions and hundreds of billions of dollars has actually caused X price glitches on multiple occasions. Some speculate that these are short-term test runs, where huge amounts of money flow in a matter of seconds, causing the price to abruptly soar and retrace instead of being price glitches. XRP, something akin to what had happened to Gemini when it was initially listed, when they listened, they nearly instantly soared to $50. In reality, people were buying and selling XRP at that $50 figure. They eventually blocked all purchases, reversed sales, and issued a statement stating that, sure, there was a scarcity of supply rather than a price malfunction. Because of the high demand, there was a shortage of XRP, which caused the price to skyrocket to $50 and transactions to take place. Now, this is up if we look at XRP over the long term. 42,000. Indeed, XRP is rising. In the last day, its volume has increased by around 23% to $644 billion. When you consider that 19 trillion will be introduced in the next year or so, and that the price of XRP will soar to thousands of dollars by Q1 of 2026, which is just a few months away, it makes sense that the charts would perfectly align with that momentum. The charts look fantastic and are actually poised for a massive breakup. Let's examine all of this material in more detail, though. We're going to show you something right now. The amount of $35,000 is no longer shocking. For XRP, the likelihood is actually higher than we ever anticipated. Here's an illustration. According to the director of one of the biggest and most international venture capital firms, these guys have risk management teams that focus solely on it. However, the director of VL Capital actually stated in public that they believe XRP may become worth between $10,000 and $35,000 once regulatory safeguards are in place and it becomes the world's bridge currency. How can we overlook the fact that Brad Carling, the CEO of Ripple, has openly stated that XRP is the only digital asset that can potentially solve a multi-trillion-dollar problem at the magnitude of a global payments crisis, potentially facilitating trillions of dollars every day, if not hundreds of trillions. In fact, Archax, one of the biggest hedge funds and payment processors, forecast that within the next 2 years, XRP will enable over $50 trillion in transactions on the XRP ledger. Once more, these are enormous organizations, and officials are openly discussing this. As you are aware, during the next 2 years, we will trade $30 to $50 trillion worth of XRPL. However, how is that even possible? The bottom line is that XRP is the most popular cryptocurrency in America, and organizations, central banks, and government representatives are now signing agreements to unlock billions of dollars, just trillions of dollars, into American cryptocurrencies, XRP in particular, and the U.S. economy. However, it also boils down to organizations expanding on the XRP ledger and opening up a new market that might release hundreds of trillions of dollars. A major supply shock for XRP, and more especially the real token that they use for transactions built on the XRP ledger, will undoubtedly result from RealFi's positioning to unlock a massive $64.39 trillion global real estate market directly onto the XRP ledger. The actual token now plays a significant role in the XRP ledger. On the XRP ledger, it is actually the most valuable real-world asset token. On the XRP ledger, it is the top DeFi project. Additionally, it is the XRPL's top real estate project. Through the use of the XRP ledger, this cryptocurrency is being facilitated. However, it's likely that you are unfamiliar with them. They aren't listed on any one centralized exchange after all. They are truly tackling a multi-trading dollar problem, which is why they are soaring despite the lack of a mass marketing campaign. Furthermore, the scope of the issue they are resolving, this is very useful in supporting that enormous boom. From 1/100th of a penny to, I believe, 3 cents, it has changed. And I'll show you guys, and we'll discuss it in more detail soon. However, it's crucial to declare that the moment has arrived. In order to improve accessibility of the real token, the official reward token of the RealFi ecosystem, which is entirely based on the XRP ledger, RealFi, the organization that is actually building on the XRP ledger and uses the real token, has announced that it has started talks with a number of top blockchains. Additionally, they intend to handle some of the biggest swaps. This will skyrocket into the thousands if the real token is published on a centralized exchange, after all. It should come as no surprise that XRP Queen, one of the most well-known and significant figures in the cryptocurrency industry, openly stated that it would be insignificant if only 1% of the $650 trillion market invested in real tokens, which is a very small supply of roughly 22 million Phase 1 supplies. But real token will soar to $65,000 if just 1% of the $650 trillion is invested. It's insane. But once more, you need to investigate and conduct the necessary study. For example, look at this. Together with XRP, XEC, and XLM, the real token has achieved the highest rating. It's a perfect score. Look at this, please. Low danger for all 3 of the top 3 holders. Both the KYC and bank scores are 100%. Again, the total wallets are 3491. But since this project is more than 2 or 3 months old, it is extremely new and difficult to modify centrally. However, both the expansion and the growth are ridiculous. Once more, people sense promise, which is the reason it's exponential. It's an actual effort addressing a real, multi-trillion-dollar problem. This has nothing to do with central exchanges, This is solely based on utility. The volume is climbing because of this. The price action is skyrocketing because of this. It's because institutions require it to genuinely enable transactions in real-world assets, but there isn't enough supply to go around. This is a huge, huge problem. It is based primarily on the XRP ledger and is up 10%. Additionally, the levels of support are quite strong, and the resistance is very modest. Guys, this is really big. It will never fall as low as it is now. At the moment, it is trading at roughly 3 cents. Genuine utility lies in the genuine token, if you're searching for anything that will solve a multi-trillion-dollar problem. Furthermore, the gear has enormous potential because its price will skyrocket once it is listed on centralized platforms. These are up at least $50, $60, and $70, much like any real-world asset project published on a single centralized exchange. Additionally, they typically have a supply of between 100 billion and 200 billion. Thank you for viewing. Peace, and I'll see you all again soon.